Welcome to the first episode of the webinar series of the World Diamond Museum. My name is Jacob van Moor, Communications Director of the World Diamond Museum. During the coming months, we will host almost all the authors who contributed to the book Diamonds Across Time, and each speaker will present for 40 minutes with time for questions. This is coming in, we will be doing it until the middle of the year, we estimate. But first, let me hand over briefly to our founder and chairman, Alex Popov, for his words of welcome.
Thank you very much, Jacob. Thank you very much, Jacob. It's a big pleasure to see everybody here. Good afternoon, good evening in India, or the good time of the day, wherever you are. Happy New Year. I wish you health and the fulfillment of all your desire in 2022. And thank you very much for joining us today, some of you on the short notice, which I really appreciate. The World Diamond Museum is commencing the series of webinars today. We will meet not only the authors of our last book, Facets of Mankind, but also other distinguished authors and researchers, always covering the same subject, the beautiful world of diamonds. Let me thank my collaborators, first and foremost, Dr. Usha Balakrishnan, the Chief Curator of the World Diamond Museum, also Dr. Jacob van Moor, our media and industry relation person, and not last but not least, Rinda Arora, for working tirelessly for the last several weeks to make this happen on the technical side. And without further ado, I just want to start to listen to the very interesting subject that Jack is going to present. Welcome, Jack. I'm not going to introduce you. We have more knowledgeable people to do it. So please go ahead, and thank you very much for being here, all of you.
Thank you.
Before we do that, Jack, I would like to ask Dr. Usha Balakrishnan to say a few words, and then I will introduce you because I'm not sure what you're going to say about yourself. So Usha, go ahead.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. And thank you, Jack, for kicking off this series. We are all looking forward to this evening and for the tremendous response that we have had for this first in our series of webinars. Just a very brief overview of the book that kind of has resulted in these webinars. It's all about diamonds. Diamonds tell stories that are captivating and timeless. On the one hand, they're just stones, pieces of pure carbon, and yet they glitter and sparkle like stars. So the book actually presents a sweeping overview of this exceptional gemstone across time and space. 10 essays by 10 leading authors, all of us in love with this forever stone. New discoveries, we explore great collections, investigate histories, and today we are proud to begin this series with a person, although he's going to be introduced formally, who actually needs no introduction to us jewelry lovers and historians. I think a person whose hunts and discoveries have actually rewritten the histories of many a great diamond. So Jack, thank you on behalf of all of us here this evening for joining us and inaugurating this series. Over to you, Jacob.
Yeah, thank you. So it's no problem to start introducing Jack as an eminent jewelry historian who was born into a jewelry retailing family. And Jack actually pursued a kind of unique career. He worked in the family business, got hooked on Egyptology and was fascinated by Egypt and Asian history, but ended up doing a PhD at Durham University. And with the exception of the Society of Jewelry Historians, which he founded and still chairs, you do, yes?
Well, I'm just about to resign or retire as president.
You still chair it.
Fair enough.
Roles in organizations, committees, and societies are really too many to mention. And the list of his publications is as long as his arm. So today, Jack will take us on a fascinating diamond jewelry. After his talk, dear participants, he will answer some of your questions that we ask you will be submitting through the chat. We will look at them and we will choose some of the questions to submit to Jack. Our digital whiz, Rinda Aurora, will be supervising all this. And Jack, the screen is yours.
Okay. Hang on. I'm just going to. I think is that showing up in the right places?
Yes,
Yep.
it is.
Brilliant. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, particularly Alex Popov, Yakov Almor, Usha Balakrishna, for arranging this, for seeing this thing through. I mean, it's quite a lot of work's gone into not just the seminar series, but producing the volume for the Facets of Mankind, the World Diamond Museum. So thanks for everyone that's been involved in this. And I think it's wonderful because one of the things you're doing is actually bringing together, if you like, the history of diamonds with the modern diamond world. And that's so important because we say the modern market, we're selling diamonds, it's based on emotion. And a big part of emotion is history. So knowing something of the history of these stones adds a whole dimension to it. So anyway, my job today, if you call it that, is to give a rather rapid rundown on some of the famous diamonds I've worked on in terms of research over the years. It's quite a leap through quite a few stones, so it's going to be fairly brief about each one of them. But I hope it'll be entertaining, and pretty well everything I'm talking about has been published somewhere around the place. So there's more out there for you to find. Right, interest in diamonds. I thought I'd start with next things. Oh, come on, this is not switching over. Sorry about this. For some reason, my slides. There we are. Good. That's better. Right. I just thought to start talking about interest in diamonds. I thought we could start with this one. This is, as you can see, it's the Google searches for diamonds in the USA between 2004 and present. There's a gradual decline, which actually is, this is in the USA, which actually mirrored in other colored stones. I don't know why there's decline. That's not my job to find out. But the interesting thing is this peak. Sorry. It's in autumn 2012. And I know we've got lots of diamond people in the diamond industry looking at this. And I'm sure some of you will know why there's this huge peak of interest in diamonds in the autumn of 2012. You're racking your brains. If anybody guesses, I'll be very surprised. It was actually Rihanna launched her single, Diamonds, in 2012, which became the top single in more than 20 countries around the world. So I think this puts an interest in diamonds in some sort of perspective. For the general population, diamonds are something they, for special occasions, but an interest in diamonds is something a little unusual. So why on earth I'm interested in the history of diamonds, which is even more esoteric, if you like? Well, as Yakov said, I was sort of interested in archaeology as a kid. I was given a book when I was 7 years old, so I got totally hooked on archaeology from a very early age. This was my museum in my teens, in my parents' attic. That's the Egyptian department over on that side there. So I was very keen on this. In fact, but I was also in a jewellery family, involved in jewellery for 4 generations of jewellery. And the year after this photograph was taken, I actually went to Switzerland, to Lucerne, and I worked with Dr. Gubelin, an eminent gemologist, most of you will have heard of, for the rest of the year. And he actually gave me my first ride on a microscope, if you like. He actually understood my interest in history, and he really encouraged me. But of course, he had a wonderful laboratory, gemological laboratory. So he made me realize you could combine sort of, if you like, jewelry with science, if that's the right way of putting it. So I sort of studied various things. I did gemology, I studied some metallurgy, I did various relevant stuff around it. But I was mainly interested in antiquity, ancient, mainly materials and technology of jewellery, particularly gold working from an early period. And I hadn't really thought much about sort of diamonds over the last few centuries. But then I wandered into a sort of curio antique shop, if you like, in London. And there was this book stuck on the shelf, rather decrepit looking book, handwritten, sort of day book thing. It's like not a diary exactly, but it's just talking about things that are happening. It was put together in 1814, and it's fascinating. It's quite fun. There was all sorts of riddles and things in it. And then I turned over a page, and there was this. This is a lottery ticket for the Pigot diamond. Some of you will have heard of the Pigot diamond. This is dated, I think you can probably see at the top, London 1800. This was a lottery ticket. This really intrigued me. I hadn't heard of diamonds being sold by lottery. So I started to investigate There's lots written in the books about the Pigot diamond, but usually said to have been sold at auction. There was nothing definite known about its early history. The lottery ticket says that it had to have an act of parliament to allow there to be a lottery for it. So, of course, going back through parliamentary records, you can start to find out exactly what was going on. And indeed, this is what I did. I spent a bit of time on this, studying the lottery ticket and so on, and finding out more about Pigot. It's a fascinating story. This is the Pigot diamond, or that's a computerized replica, if you like, 3D computer drawing of it. And there's Pigot, George Pigot. Now, George Pigot was governor of the East India Company in what was then Fort St. George, then became Madras and is now Chennai in India. And he lived between 1719 and 1777. Like a lot of people working with the East India Company, when he came back to the UK, I mean, actually served 2 terms, but I'm simplifying here. When he came back to the UK, he brought a large diamond with him. And this was the diamond. 48-carat Pigot diamond. It's unclear where it was cut. I imagine it was cut when it was back in London. We don't know a lot about it. We do know, actually, for the gemologists amongst you, that it was one of the earliest diamonds to have its phosphorescence studied by a guy called Benjamin Wilson, who was an early pioneer in studying phosphorescence of diamonds. Anyway, he found out that the Pigot diamond phosphoresced very little, which is quite interesting in its own. So anyway, so George Pigot was a hero by old British sort of standards, if you like. You probably wouldn't think so today. It's famous really for destroying the city of Pondicherry. This is a photograph of the destroyed city of Pondicherry in India, because the French had occupied Pondicherry, and this was during the so-called 7 Years' War. So he attacked the French and in the process basically trashed the city of Pondicherry. One of his achievements, to say we don't look back quite so favorably on these things these days. But in those days, he was a hero, and this was a drawing done specially to commemorate this. Now, it appears that from the time he got back this large diamond back to England, he was trying to sell it, but without success. He couldn't sell it. Somebody said at the time, the problem was it was of too great a value for anyone to buy. Now, we always say that, that something is worth what someone's prepared to pay for it. But here, it wasn't possible to buy because nobody could afford to buy it. It was too expensive for anybody. So the only answer was to sell it by lottery. And this went through the various, as I said, the various processes in Parliament to discuss whether a lottery was possible. And part of the parliamentary proceedings was to put a value on it. And they had lots of jewellers look at the stone, and one London jeweller said he had never seen such a diamond uniting the 4 qualities of weight, size, water, and brilliance, which is similar to the 4 C's of today, of course. And that he said it was worth between about £25,000 and £30,000. Now, the total value of lottery tickets sold had to equate to the value of the stone. So they sold 11,428 lottery tickets at 2 guineas, that's £2.1 each for this stone. Sorry, there we are. That's another announcement of the lottery. This was actually given to me by a dear friend, Benjamin Zucker, who I saw on the list of participants. So welcome, Benjamin. This is this document you gave me. I'm very, very grateful for that. It's basically an advertisement, come and buy your lottery tickets from us, because lottery tickets were available through various agents. And that's as far as we can work out the size of the Pigot diamond. Sorry, my computer's not actually turning over the way it should do. There we are. That was the lottery. Or that's not actually the lottery, but it's a similar lottery in London at about the same time. We know the draw for the diamond took place on the 2nd of March, 1801, and ticket number 9,488 won. And this was actually shared. The ticket had been bought as a sort of joint group of 4 young men. So these 4 young men suddenly on 2nd of March, 1801, realized they owned what was then described as the largest diamond in England. Now, I'm sure they went out and did what young people do. They probably went to the pub that night and got gloriously drunk to celebrate their winnings. And then I think they must have suddenly realized that George Pigot had spent a long, long time trying to sell it and hadn't been able to. So what on earth were they going to do with it? It wasn't something you could just sort of turn in and get your money for quickly. So it was put into auction at Christie's in London. Here we are. And this is a page from the Christie's catalogue of the auction, 10th of May, 1802. Sorry, there we are. That's, I can just go, that's that there. That's a print of James Christie, and he's actually selling a diamond there. It says, a mere trifle of brilliant of the first water. Unfortunately, this isn't the pigot that he's selling, Christie. This is actually done print. It's 8 years before the pigot was sold, but it gives an idea of the auction at the time. And it was knocked down, if that's, well, it sounds really crude way of saying it, was knocked down to a couple of jewellers in London. And they basically sold a half share to a company called Rundle and Bridge, that were very famous jewellers. You've probably heard the name, Rundle and Bridge in London. They sold it to Rundle and Bridge, or a half share to Rundle and Bridge, and Rundle and Bridge tried to sell it. And they did all sorts of things to try and sell it. Here's a drawing of it while it was with Rundle and Bridge. They tried to sell it to Napoleon. Now, this was a problem because it was Napoleonic Wars were going on. They got it to France, but that was in 1804. They got it to France. They couldn't get it back because of the wars going on, Napoleonic Wars. And it didn't actually get back to England until 1816 after the Battle of Trafalgar. So it was actually in France for 12 years, out of reach for any potential customers because Napoleon didn't want it. And in fact, the two jewellers who had sold the half share to Rundle and Bridge were not very happy about this because they hadn't actually been asked about sending it to France in the first place. So they went, there was a complicated court case, and they eventually Rundle bought out their half share for £8,000. Anyway, eventually hanging on to it and asking a high price worked because it was sold to the Pasha of Egypt. That's the ruler of Egypt at the time, for £30,000. And in fact, this drawing of jewellery that was with Rundle and Bridge at the time, and that is a drawing of the pigot, that's enlarged. The pigot diamond sold to the Pasha of Egypt for £30,000, 1820, and it gives the weight. So it was sold to the Pasha of Egypt. Now, this wasn't just a sale the Pasha fancied a nice diamond. There's more to it than that, because it seems to have been caught up very much in British diplomacy, because the British wanted the Pasha of Egypt not to side with the Ottoman Sultan in the War of Greek Independence. They didn't want Egypt to get involved in that. And this was a kind of a bribe, I think. I'm not sure quite how whether the Pasha actually paid for it or whether somebody else paid for it. But anyway, it was sent to Egypt. And it was sent out with help. I mean, no less than the British Foreign Secretary urged that it had to be sent quickly. A British admiral carried it from London to the port in his waistcoat pocket, and then entrusted to a captain of a British battleship to get to Egypt. So it certainly wasn't just an ordinary transaction. There was something special going on there. What we don't really know is what happened. It certainly got to the Pasha of Egypt. We see here Muhammad Ali, Pasha of Egypt. We see that on the left of your screens. And his idea, or the theory, was that he was then going to give it to the Mahmud II, the Ottoman Sultan in Constantinople, to stop the Ottomans from, or to excuse, if you like, Egypt from siding with the Turks against the Greeks. We have presumed it actually reached this guy, but we don't actually know. There's nothing to say. There's various rumors, there's odd stories you see, like all the stones I'm talking about, there's all sorts of garbled stuff kicking around on the internet and in books, but there's very little hard fact. And, the stone's supposed to have been destroyed by a mistress and all these sort of odd stories, but there's no substantiation for any of them. So we don't know. And I got really excited when I found this. The English Chronicle for the 22nd of January, 1824, this says that the Gazette of Augsburg announces that the Sultan, that's the Ottoman Sultan, pays great respect to Lord Strangford, who is the British ambassador in Constantinople, and has shown him a superb present of diamonds which he received from the Pasha of Egypt. Yeah, I thought, this is really exciting. I found the pigot. This must have been it. And I tried to find out the Gazette of Augsburg, and it turned out that it wasn't actually called that, the publication. It was actually the Allgemeine Zeitung here. And here is the actual comment here. And this old German is not easy to read, but it basically says an expensive agraf of diamonds. It didn't mention agraf in that particular British report, but because maybe the word wasn't that familiar. Because agraf, for those of you who don't know, is a kind of clasp or fastener. So had they set the pigot diamond in a large clasp? Not impossible, of course. Maybe that's where it was. So I still thought there's a chance this was a thing. And then a few days later, the Augsburg Zeitung published a retraction. There again, I don't expect you to read this. And they're basically saying how they, in our last letter about the diamond agraf, it wasn't. It was actually a giraffe. They'd mistaken an agraf for a giraffe. Now that sounds a very odd thing to do, but in fact, the Pasha of Egypt did send giraffes to various rulers in various countries, including one went to France. And I think this is the French one in the drawing here. So indeed, the Morning Post, a little later in January 1824, noticed the Sultan gave a live giraffe was to come from Egypt. By an error, it was said in a formal letter that it was an agraf of diamond. So what I hoped had been the pigot diamond arriving in Turkey was not, it was a giraffe. I think the only time in history that a giraffe has been mistaken for a diamond. So what's the next diamond? Well, this is a fun one. Sorry, I'll go back. That's the thing. If you read one of the first books on the great diamonds of the world by Edwin Streeter, and I mean, he's very good. I mean, he wrote a lot about the history of diamonds, and I think making it up when he couldn't find anything else about them. It's not entirely reliable as an author, but he just says, another gem unknown to history, possibly to be found in Tehran. John Murray's Memoir of the Diamond, the Hornby diamond, brought from the East Indies by the Honourable William Hornby, so and so and so and so. I believe the property of the Shah of Persia. Nothing else. What is the Hornby diamond? What is it? Where has it been? So this was an intriguing thing to try and follow up. So this was a fun story because this is William Hornby. He was with the East India Company in India. We know something of the story because a diamond was stolen from, I won't go into the story in detail, it's quite a complicated, but a large diamond was stolen from the Shah of Persia. It reached India with, I believe, Armenian dealers, and Hornby bought it. And he brought it back to Britain when he retired. He actually sent it back to Britain with his son-in-law, but he came back to Britain. They tried to sell it to Catherine the Great in Russia, but that didn't work. So when Hornby died in 1803, the diamond was still kicking around, still there. It was probably in a very small box covered with paper and sealed that had been lodged with the London Bank, mentioned in his will. So they couldn't sell it. So again, they thought, let's try a lottery. But unfortunately, this time it didn't work. So it ended up in auction. It came up for auction at Phillips here in January 1807. And it says here, a unique, magnificent, superb, pink, brilliant, weighing 236 grains and 3/4. So now we know the color and the weight of Hornby's diamond. How do we know it's Hornby's? Well, enter this guy, so Harford Jones. Harford Jones had been in sort of India and other parts of the Middle East and various roles. And he explains that he's wandering around London one day, instead of being in London and having nothing to do, he wandered into Phillips auctioneers and saw the pink diamond was up for sale, found out that it didn't fetch its reserve, and talked to Phillips himself, the auctioneers, about it. And he recognized it because he'd heard about this stone in India. And he said, this is Hornby's diamond coming up for sale. So this gave him an idea, because he was appointed as a sort of ambassador, if you like, to go to Iran. Now, the reason to go to Iran was quite a serious one, because, sorry, that I should have said, that's Harper Jones, yes, to Iran. because this was the time of the Napoleonic Wars still. And the Brits were really worried that Napoleon would use Iran as a stepping stone to invade India, to take over British possessions in India. This was their big worry. So Hartford Jones' job was to go to Tehran and try and persuade the Shah to side with the British. And he thought the ideal thing to do would be to take this nice big pink diamond with him and give it as a gift. And indeed, that's what happened. It's quite a complicated story, the journey. It's all there. It's been published and everything else. But anyway, he turned up at the court of the Shah of Persia. There he is. That's Hartford Jones there, and that's the Shah of Persia with his splendid beard. Gave him the diamond, which the Shah was very pleased with, and immediately said, I'm going to have nothing more to do with the French. I'm now going to support the British. So diamonds do work, don't they? Ambassador's best friend as well as the girl's best friend, I think. So there it ended up with the Shah. There he is with this nice big pink diamond. So where is it now? Well, I think it's this stone. There, the Nur al-Ain in the treasury or the jewellery palace, or sorry, the jewellery treasures of Tehran, the Iranian crown jewels, that now called the Treasury of National Jewels in Tehran. This was looked at by Mir and Tushingham in the 1960s, and they estimated about 60 carats. And I think it's almost certainly the same stone. It's the same weight, it's pink. There's exactly the same stone that Hartford Jones' stone he took there weighed. And there are not many 60-carat pink diamonds that would have appeared in the treasury in Tehran over the years. It was actually, here's the thing, it was worn here for the last Shah's wife's wedding in the tiara. Or the stone itself is quite interesting because it's believed to have been this. This, of course, is the famous stone drawn by Tavernier when he went to India in I think it's on his, I'm not sure, his 6th trip. Anyway, and he drew this one called the large tablet diamond, a large table diamond, which he drew. And Mean and Tushingham, Canadian geologist, Victor Mean, Arlott Tushingham, who visited Tehran and studied the jewels in the 1960s, described the stone as an irregular circle, which is actually almost the same description that had been used earlier for Hornby's diamond, about 60 carats, and they suggested it had been cut from the great table, providing these two, and cut like that, forming what is now the Dur al-Ain and the Nur al-Ain, which is nothing less than of course, I believe the Hornby stone. Now, there's probably arguments about it. I still think it's unlikely there were two 60-carat pink diamonds in Tehran, but it's not impossible, I suppose. So in a way, it's quite funny because the stone was originally stolen from the Iranians, they're then given back their own stone, which is, they got it back. They didn't actually have to ask for it, but it was given back to them. So it's quite an interesting circular story, if you like. Another stone that some people want to go back is this guy, the nassak. Now, again, if you read the intonable stuff on the internet and most of the books about diamonds, this was stolen from the temple in Nassak in India. But as far as I can see, there's no documentation that it was stolen from that temple at all. There might be in Indian records, and I'd love to know if there are. But the earliest I found in the UK of any record that it was stolen from this temple is by Edwin Streeter. And as I say, he's not reliable. And in the 19th century, any large diamond had been stolen from the eye of an idol in some temple somewhere. So I don't necessarily believe that. So this is a 3D. This is not an actual photograph of the nassak as it was. This is a 3D replica, very kindly produced by Janak Mystery for the Diamond Suit Time volume. So it's supposed to have come from here. Now, what actually happened, because there's a lot of information written about this, but not in any of the diamond books. It was actually written in more about in Hartford Jones's own writings about his expedition to Persia. He explained all about it. and from other, sorry, not Hartford Jones, from a guy Briggs, I'm sorry, I'm muddling up the two. It's been written about quite a lot, and I'll come to that, because it's supposed to have been stolen from this temple in Nassak, possibly by this guy, the ruler, Baji Rao II, who was the 13th and last ruler of Peshwa, as they called it, ruler of the Maratha Empire in India. He governed from 1795 to 18. Now, he certainly had the stone. Whether he stole it from this temple, again, maybe there's some records in India that explains that, but I'd love to know if there are. But now enters this other guy, someone called John Briggs. John Briggs was a captain at this time in India, and we're lucky because this is a volume of his private letters. There's all sorts of private letters and papers and so on here, which went into the India Office Library. It used to be the India Office Library in London, is now part of the British Library. And this is a wonderful collection of papers, and a huge amount about the origin of the Nassak diamond and how it reached the UK. Elphinstone, who was the sort of local military guy in India at the time, he heard, on what he said, good, reliable information. This is Elphinstone's handwriting. It's a note, and I can't. I mean, you can read it, but it's basically saying, "I've heard from a trusted source that Baji Rao's treasure was hidden in the town of Nassak," and he sent this to John Briggs. Sent it to John Briggs. Very small, rolled up note, presumably can be hidden, so where he wouldn't be caught if he was captured by anybody. And it was sent to Briggs and to go and investigate and find the treasure in the city of Nassak. And we have a huge amount of information about this. Briggs went to Nassak, and he explains almost every moment of this discovery. At one point he says, "A door in the corner of a dark room concealed a small closet, 4 foot square, below a pair of stairs. In the face of the closet next to the stairs was evidently a new wall, which upon being removed concealed a pile of bricks of the same dimensions of the closet. When this was displaced, it disclosed a passage leading under the closet, and at a depth of 6 feet was a brick arch in which were lodged 4 large copper pots containing treasure, carelessly tied up in pieces of rag without seals and loose in pots," and so on. This is just one of the treasures. He found numerous treasures, gold, silver, jewels, all sorts of things. And in fact, he stayed in the old palace in Nassak while they were searching for this stuff. And he actually said he was sleeping in his dressing gown within a few yards of the guard looking after the treasure. So he was right there at it. So this was taken by the British, this treasure, huge amount of stuff. I mean, vast quantity, from sort of gold plates down to gems and stones, including this rather wonderful diamond. All of it was sold in India. Again, we have details, we have lists, we have the prices and so on. But it was all sold apart from the diamond, which was considered to be too important to sell in India, and was sent back to Britain. This is the actual shipping receipt. This is when it was sent on the ship. Here, I can't read the date here offhand. October 1819. This is the captain of the ship basically saying he's taken receipt of the stone to take back to England, comes back to England, and it goes to a jewellery company. And of course, it's the same old jewellery company we've heard of before, Rundle and Bridge. And this is Rundle and Bridge's receipt to say they've received it from the East India Company, a diamond called the Nassak diamond weighing 358 grains, delivered blah, 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 Rundle, Bridge and Rundle. So it arrived with Rundles. They were the diamonds. If there's a big diamond in London, it's like to be with Rundles. Now, it wasn't bought by Rundles, as some accounts say. It was left with them to try and sell, because it still remained on the books of the East India Company. You can actually go through their annual accounts, and it's there as an asset of the East India Company. And they tried to sell it, but no luck. And as late as 1824, there were more questions about its ownership. Was it war booty? Was it this? Was it that? Because it was unclear, because they hadn't actually laid siege to the city of Nassak. They just wandered in and dug up the treasure. So where did it come legally? Was it sort of legal military plunder, or was it theft, or what? So there's a lot of legal uncertainty about the nature of this stone. But eventually, it was sold at auction. not until 1837 it was sold at auction, where it fetched £7,200. This is the drawing from all different angles of the nassak diamond. Fetched this vast sum of money. And 1841, it was recut, comes down to much smaller weight, just over 80 carats. This is a replica in CZ that was cut by Scott Susher. Very grateful. This is allowed me to use this for the chapter in the Diamonds Across Time. And since then, it's been recut again by Harry Winston down to just over 43 carats, middle of the 20th century. It's what the GIA describes as a rectangular modified emerald cut, described as flawless and of the highest color grade. It's now half the weight than when it left India. It's extraordinary how these stones get smaller and smaller, seemingly more valuable. I'll come back to that later. Now, there's been quite a lot in recent years of India wanting the nassak diamond back because they believe it was stolen from the temple, which not necessarily was. So there might be information about that, but that it had come out of India illegally. So there's been a call to have it back. And if you look at this in the internet, you'll quite often find, there you are, that's the weight now, 400 things. You'll find that it's often shown as blue. Why is it turned blue? You'll see a lot of this on the internet for the nassak diamond. Well, the answer is because it's been largely confused with another stone. This one, the so-called idol's eye, a 70 carat stone, which is light blue. And we say it's light blue, but it wasn't actually described as light blue until well into the 20th century, because it doesn't actually look like blue in sunlight, because most sort of good diamonds, if you like, blue-white diamonds, they look slightly bluish anyway in sunlight. So it doesn't look particularly blue. And under sort of traditional older yellowish artificial lighting, it doesn't look blue at all. I've held this in my hand and I've looked at it in various, under a diamond light, you can see it's beautiful, pale, light blue, but take it to a window in sunlight, it just looks like a white diamond. Have it under normal domestic lighting, and it looks like a white diamond. So it wasn't described as blue until well into the 20th century. This has quite an interesting story. All sorts of legends attached to it. Most of them are complete nonsense and totally invented. This is the stone photographed on the brow of the model Angela Howard in 1962 when it was auctioned in New York. The earliest owner I can find for this was somebody called Edward Strutt Hallam. The diamond was one of the things that belonged to him that was sold at auction when he died in 1865. 20 years earlier, Phillips Auction House had actually offered the celebrated diamond, Idol's Eye diamond, for auction, which may have been the same stone, but as I say, a lot of stones were being described as coming from the eye of an idol in a temple, so we can't be sure. Anyway, it's an interesting story, this, and because it ended up various things, went backwards and forwards to Constantinople. It was owned in Turkey for a time, came back, auctioned, as I say, in New York, when all sorts of this garbled story about him sort of, I don't know, owned by mysterious princesses and God knows what else going on. A lot of strange stuff. It was bought at auction by Chicago jeweler Harry Levinson. This is one of his advertisements for the stone. Discovered in the Indian Golconda mines. No evidence for that possibility, of course. Probably the Persian prince Rahab. Reappeared, disappeared for 200 years and reappeared as an idol. I mean, I don't know where they get this stuff from. I mean, it's there's a lot of this sort of invented stories of diamonds. It's quite funny, really. Harry Levinson's an interesting character. I won't obviously mention his alleged connection with the mob. I don't think it's a good thing to mention. But anyway, he had it, and then he sold it to Lawrence Graff in 1979, then to Imelda Marcos, and then on to Muad. When Muad exhibited it in Paris in 2001 and the year later in Rome, the catalogues described it as the nassak diamond, which is where this confusion comes up. So this is Harry Winston's hand. There was a big exhibition of diamonds from Harry Winston around America in 1950, around about 1950. And in various centers it was held. this big exhibition. And this is just a hand of some of the diamonds and other gems he had on show. So that's the idol's eye there. While we're on blue diamonds, what about that one? That, of course, is the Hope, which we've all heard of. That's a good stone, the Hope diamond. 45.52 carats, fancy dark grayish blue, BS1. Nice big stone. Very similar to the first ever drawing of it, which is this one, which I found in the archives of the National History Museum in London. This is I think the earliest drawing of the Hope diamond. You see, it hasn't changed really at all, has it? We all know the story of this. I mean, I'm not getting, it's a very hurried survey, this. Jean-Baptiste Tavernier, I'm told now it shouldn't have a hyphen, it should be Jean-Baptiste Tavernier, not Jean-Baptiste Tavernier, apparently. Anyway, Tavernier's trip to India on his 6th trip, the 1660s, he brought back these wonderful diamonds, which he sold to King Louis in France. And up here, of course, is this large diamond that he describes as a fair violet color. Hang on. There, that's his drawing of it, and that's that's actually a computer thing I did of it, of roughly what it would look like originally. The assumption, of course, always is that he brought this from India. But, you know, there's the old saying, says question everything. And there's quite a lot of information about Tavernier other than just his recorded travels. For example, this is the invoice for the diamonds that he sold to the King of France, Louis XIV. And it describes that what we call the Haute diamond became the French blue as a grand diamond, a grand blue, a large blue diamond, blah, 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 blah. But it's cut in the Indian fashion. Now, most of the other stones in that same invoice, the ones he showed in the drawing, were described as either Indian cut, and so on. So this is described as cut in the Indian fashion, not Indian or cut in India. This is a little odd. And to try and find out more, I started looking through other documentations. There's a wonderful court case involving Tavernier, which he talks a huge amount about his travels back from India. Quite fun thing, but nothing about where he bought the diamonds. But then, almost by chance, in Record Office, Leicestershire, one of the county in England, Leicestershire Record Office, I found a 1668 letter from the British consul in Aleppo to the Earl of Winchelsea, who was the British ambassador in Constantinople. And this says that Tavernier had with him a diamond for which he had paid the equivalent of £7,000. Now, that is an awful lot of money in those days, a huge amount. This must have been quite a special diamond, which he had bought from a Muslim dealer in Isfahan in Iran. So is it possible that he had bought his blue diamond, which later was cut as the French blue, in Tehran from another diamond dealer? I mean, it would have come from India originally, almost certainly. There's just a possibility that he'd actually bought this in Isfahan. You can't rely on anything, can you, these days? Anyway, this is the Hope as we know it. The Tavernier's blue stone there, recut as the French blue in the French crown jewels until the Revolution. Thanks to Herbert Horowitz for the drawing of this. Let me use it. And then this drawing here that I found in the archives of the National History Museum. This was drawn by a well-known mineralogist, James Sowerby. This is his drawing, this guy, and nice drawing of it. It may not be the first drawing, in fact, because we do actually have the so-called Francillon information. There's another drawing of the stone, giving the weight, and some notes about it. The above drawings, exact size and shape of a curious, superfine deep blue diamond, and so on. This was done when the stone was in London in 1812 with a diamond dealer called Ellison. And how it had been lost in the French Revolution and then reappears in 1812 in London. And we still can't fill in the gaps, what happened over the previous 20 years or so. We'll get there one day. But at the moment we can't. But we do know that Ellison had it, Sowerby drew it, and this is the advertising brochure, if you like, for the stone, using Serby's drawing. I think there's about 3 copies of this thing, which is basically a little pamphlet to sell the stone. Now, some people say that it was sold to King George in England, the stone. Few books still say that. There's no record of that at all. But we do know that King George's wife was shown the drawing of the stone, or at least this pamphlet, presumably, because by weird fluke, when I published this thing about the diamond being in London in 1812 in the Journal of Gemology, stories about it, Johann Kjellman, who's the curator of mineralogy in the Museum of Evolution in Uppsala in Sweden, emailed me. He had seen the article, and he had found, by total chance, a letter in Uppsala University Library, which was from James Sowerby, the guy that drew the diamond, thanking a Dr. Maton, M-A-T-O-N, Dr. George Maton, for showing the print, presumably the pamphlet, to Queen Charlotte, the wife of King George. So it's quite fun how these things turn up. You know, you write an article and then the information starts flowing, people read it and it comes in. That's what research is, really. Nothing stops. There's no, we've done it, we've finished the research. It doesn't happen. It goes on. There's always stuff. You're building, changing things, changing ideas as things move on. Went to Philip Hope, of course, the stone eventually. He bought it from Ellison, almost certainly in 1821, as far as I can see. There's there again, the books say anything up to about in the 1830s. But Henry Philip Hope, this is a drawing of him in Ottoman dress. This is Henry Philip Hope. I found this purely by chance in what used to be called the Prince of Wales Museum in Mumbai, or hanging on the wall. I don't know the modern museum of the name, I'm afraid I can't pronounce, but it used to be called the Prince of Wales Museum in Mumbai. Anyway, this is Henry Philip Hope, and he bought the diamond that took his name, the Hope diamond. I think in 1821, the best evidence for that is that Sir Edward Thomason, who was a big English manufacturer of jewellery, glass, and very keenly interested in diamonds. He used to lecture on diamonds, and he says quite a lot about the stone, the Hope diamond, in his memoirs. He says it was offered to George III, but the king didn't buy it, and that Hope had been interested in it for some time, kept going back to Ellison to look at the diamond again, and eventually Hope went to Ellison, wrote a cheque for £13,000, put it in front of Ellison and say, you have 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, you either give me the diamond, take the check, or I take my check back. And Ellison took the check. So Hope ended up with it, £13,000. And indeed, there was a court case later on about this. And Bram Hertz, the brilliant gemologist and diamond dealer at the time, who wrote the Hope jewellery catalogue, in his court witness statements, he does actually say that Hope had paid £13,000 for the stone. It's interesting that apparently, according to Thomason, when Ellison took the check, he muttered that the diamond was dog cheap. Now, dog cheap is an old expression meaning dirt cheap. When this story was repeated a few years later, it had been changed to say Ellison saying, "You got it cheap, dog, dirt cheap." So slight different stress there, isn't there? Anyway, here's the diamond and the top, as I believe it was when Hope had it, as far as I can tell, with a kind of a computer drawing. I don't know what it probably looked like there. And below, that's as it was shown in the 1855 Paris exhibition, when it was shown by Hancock's of London. It's the stone there. So we know all about the Hope. Not much more to say, except briefly, I bought a notebook in a collection, in an auction in Holland, and it has some drawings of glass models of diamonds that had been on show at the Great Exhibition in London in 1851. And this is a drawing of the glass model, but it actually says that Hope exhibited a casket containing a blue diamond, because Hope had also exhibited the diamonds at the Great Exhibition. Now, this is a circular thing again, because the glass models at the Great Exhibition were exhibited by George Collis, a company that had taken over Thomason's company in Birmingham. As I said, Thomason was very much into making glass, and in fact, had made glass models of famous diamonds. So it's quite possible that this was actually a glass model made by Thomason, the guy that explains how the hope had been bought. While we're on blue diamonds, we've just got another blue diamond here. This guy, some of you will know this one. This is the Tereshenko, now known as the Muad Blue. Nothing's known about this before about 1900. It was sold in Christie's in Geneva in 1984 for 4.6 million to Robert Muad. Quite a stone. There we are. Sorry, fancy blue, 42.92 carats. We know a little bit about this. It's quite a fun story. In 1913, the wealthy Ukrainian businessman Mikhail Tereshenko, later Russian foreign minister, left a blue diamond of this weight with Cartier in Paris, and that followed up by instructions to mount it in a necklace. And it was sent to him in Russia, apparently in 1915. There had been rumors of a large blue diamond on the London market in 1912, which possibly this one, but so far I can't trace any further back. But what happened after it went to Russia in 1915? Well, at the same time Mikhail Tereshenko had been in Paris, there had been a dancer. There we are, that's Tereshenko. There had been a dancer, Suzanne Marie Blanche Thullier, also known as Mademoiselle Primrose. And she was considered a considerable beauty for her time, famed for her beauty. And she was performing in Paris when Tereshenko was there. Now, I don't necessarily say anything happened. I'm not suggesting anything there. But she then moved to Russia to dance with the Imperial Ballet. And in her own words, regularly went to see gentlemen of the court who occupied the highest positions. Make of that what you will. Then the Russian Revolution was on the horizon, and she fled to the south of France. And when she fled, hidden in a secret pocket of her coat was a 43-odd carat blue diamond. It was the same diamond. So was she given it? Was she given it by Tereshenko? Was she given it by the Tsar, as some people say, or did she steal it? We don't know. I think there's a possibility she was given it by Tereshenko, but can't prove it. And in the south of France, she had this stone, and I think she pawned it to get money, and she gambled. And in 1924, she ended up basically in huge debt. And in fact, when I wrote an article about this a few years ago in the Gems and Jewellery of the Gemological Association, I said that the last we hear of the diamonds in 1924, when it was in the custody of the civil court in Nice in the south of France, and the last we hear of her was in 1929 in prison, having turned to forgery. Well, just recently, I found another press report, difficult to find because it misspelled her name, from 1930, saying that she had sold the diamond to the Aga Khan, who had given it to Andrei Caron, who was the Aga Khan's third wife. I can find nothing more about that. And again, it might be total invention, but it's another string to follow up. Certainly, we don't know really what happened to it until fairly recently when it entered the Muad collection. So I think we talked about blue diamonds. I think just briefly, we should talk a little bit about pink diamond. And this is the famous one, of course, the Agra diamond. 28.15 carats now, a fancy intense pink. We know again an awful lot about this. I did a lot of research on this for some of you might have the large volume called Beyond Extravagance from the collection of Sheikh Hamad Al Thani, and he owned this stone and several other of the famous stones, including the Idol's Eye. And I did a lot of research. I mean, it's an extremely long entry, many pages on the Agra, tracing it back. So I'm not going to go through all that again. We know the earliest sort of established history, if you like, is when it entered the collection of the Duke of Brunswick in 22nd of November, 1844. The Duke of Brunswick bought it from Blogg and Martin, who are London diamond dealers. He paid just over 348,000 francs, about 14,000 pounds. Our history after that is fairly well known. So the question really is, where was it before? Because the interesting thing here is that, just jump on that, because when it was in the Agra, the Duke of Brunswick collection, that's in the list of his diamonds bought from Blogg and Martin in November. And there's a little footnote, if you like, down there about this stone. And it says the brilliant, it says taken by the Emperor Baber in 1526 at Agra. No idea where that comes from. I think it was confusion with another stone. There's no record of that. So I think again, we don't know who gave that talk, but I don't think there's who suggested that. But I don't think there's anything to substantiate that whatsoever. So where was it? What can we substantiate before Duke of Brunswick? Well, two guys. So my thing is not clicking over here. The two people here involved. There's Emperor Nicholas I of Russia, who shown here on the right. He visited London in June 1844, so just a few months before the Duke of Brunswick bought the pink diamond. The Tsar, the Emperor of Russia, went to the jewellers Mortimer and Hunt in London and was shown a large pink diamond lately imported from India, valued at £7,000. I think there's a chance this was the Agra. I mean, there can't be many large pink diamonds floating around in London that same year, 1844. The other gentleman in the picture there is a fascinating guy called Major General Claude Martin. He was a military man, an inventor, French origin, ended up working with the British in India and became an advisor to the local Indian ruler and received many gifts from the Indian ruler, including probably a few diamonds. One account says he owned a circular pink diamond, something broader than half a guinea, of the purest luster, the most pellucid, brilliant, and perfect jewel in the world. Could be the Agra, right? I mean, it was a large pink diamond at the time. After his death, his belongings were sold at auction in Calcutta. And it may or may not mention this diamond, because it says one object was a beautiful rose diamond set for a ring. So did rose there mean color, or did it mean cut? Uncertain. But anyway, there's a possibility that the large pink diamond that he owned may have been the Agra, sold at auction in Calcutta, comes back to England and ends up with London diamond dealers a little bit later. So we're not sure exactly where it comes from. We might never know. The only other thing worth saying about, the only other thing we really need to say about the Agra, of course, is Edwin Streeter's part in it. In 1885, he sold the diamond to a young man, John Tasker, for £15,000. While Tasker was allegedly in an inebriated condition, he was drunk. Tasker took Streeter to court to try and get his money back. And the judge asked the court to consider whether the supposed pedigree of the gem, the history from Baber down through all these illustrious sort of Indian emperors and so on, down, whether there was anything in it and whether that story had swayed Tasker to buy the stone. I mean, was he persuaded by this fascinating story? How much reliance could be paid on the history? Well, basically, in court, this whole story, the pedigree, going back to the Agra diamond, Agra in 1526, I think, was basically laughed out of court. I mean, the press had a field day with it. Streeter looked a total idiot from what he said about it. So the verdict was misrepresentation. It was a very early case, if you like, of a provenance for something being disproved in the court. So certainly all my research sort of follows the court, really. This history of the stone going back down through lots of Indian rulers to Baber and Agra in 1526. There's nothing to substantiate it. Maybe it's not impossible, but there's nothing whatsoever to substantiate it. When the Agra came up again for sale at Christie's, hang on, I got the year here. I need to go back to this. in 1905, sorry, my notes, it came for sale at Christie's in 1905 after Streeter had died. It wasn't described as the Agra diamond. I think basically because they were probably a bit embarrassed that this terrible story about its provenance and everything else. I think it was in sort of a bit of a liability to refer to the Agra diamond back then. So it was just referred to as a magnificent rose pink diamond, although the press realized this was indeed the Agra. It had been cut sometime before Streeter obtained down to 32.24 carats, fancy light pink VVS 1. Interestingly, when it came up for sale at Christie's again in 1990, it was, guess what? A whole hardcover catalogue listing past owners going back through no less than 7 Indian rulers to 1526. The compilers of that catalogue obviously hadn't read the court description of the provenance or done any original research into it at all. I think it's shameless, actually, because as Tasker got his money back, because basically the court said that he had been swayed to buy it on the basis of this fanciful story about its history. Anyway, it sold again at Christie's with this provenance. Whether people believed it then, I don't know, but it fetched 3.7 million in 1990. One thing that might interest you about the Agra is that I have the first ever photograph of the Agra. It's this. In 1897, Streeter lent the Agra to Sir William Crookes, a British scientist, for experiments into the transparency of diamonds to X-rays. So they put in, under the X-rays, they put in a black diamond, a glass replica of the Agra, and the Agra itself. Guess which the Agra is? There's this slight cloud there. Diamonds, of course, are transparent to X-rays. So although it's the first photograph of the Agra, it's you can't see the Agra in it. So this is quite fun. This is the early example of photography of the Agra. So just as I'm winding up here, you'll be glad to hear I've come to the end of this rapid trip. Just take a look at the Agra diamond, just as one example. It started off as a delicate rose tint at 42.8 carats, became a fancy light pink at VVS 1 at 32.24 carats, and fancy intense pink, VVS 1, 28.15 carats. It's been getting smaller and smaller and smaller, but for the diamond dealers, more and more valuable. So it's not just size, is it? Size is not the important thing. You've got to ask that, I mean, the color of the stone hasn't changed, has it? It's the same diamond chemically, physically. It's just the way the light travels through the stone that's changed the color. So what is it about the stone that makes it a historical stone? It doesn't look the same. It's just recut. So one has to ask a little bit about recutting. People don't value the history, do they? They value the value of the stone based on modern diamond grading. The other thing is how things have changed. When the pigot diamond appeared on the market or appeared in pigot collections some 200 years ago, it was described as the largest diamond in England. When in Balfour, in his famous diamonds book, listed more than 100 of the largest cut diamonds in the world, all of them are larger than the pigot. So it's an interesting perspective that diamonds have changed. I think there's a lot of research that can be done, certainly on the history of the pricing of diamonds, because they seem to have gone down in the beginning of the 19th century and then come back up again. So there's more work to be done. But anyway, before I end, I'll just mention, of course, on the left, Diamonds Across Time. This is the book Usha edited, a wonderful study of diamonds, all different aspects of diamonds. This covers, my chapter in there covers the nassak diamond and the pigot, or some of it. I've written several things on the pigot, a bit about the pigot. Beyond Extravagance, this is the Altani collection. My work on the Agra, the Idol's Eye, and various others, including the Arcot, are in that. And the other things are various articles over the years. They're mainly in the Journal of Gemology, but a few other things. And of course, there's a little bit in my book, 2018, Diamonds, An Early History of the King of Gems, which covers the history of a bit about the history of the pit and the Florentine, which I haven't mentioned today. So it's an ongoing thing, that the history of diamonds. It's a fascinating study, and it keeps me busy. And there's still always more to find out. There's gaps to fill and more stuff to find out. So it's been a fascinating study, and thank you for letting me tell you about it. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Jack. Wonderful. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Jack, a number of questions have been asked. The very first question was asked by Pamela Jamieson. According to her time, she is somewhere in Central America, in Central American time. Jack, am I right that I'm thinking the current whereabouts of the pigot diamond is unknown or unknown?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Where does the pigot go? Where is the pigot diamond?
Nobody knows. No. I mean, as we've seen, I mean, all these diamonds have been, most of them have been recut over the years. So it's quite possible the pigot has reappeared on the market and been recut. We really don't know.
All right. Your co-author, René Bruss, asks, why, when we talk about recut of diamonds, we never know about who recut the diamond? Weren't the craftsmen important in those days?
Yes, I mean, we know who recut the nassak, I think. Some of them do. Yes, I mean, certainly some of them we do know. I mean, there's probably the information out there. I mean, I've only scratched the surface of all this stuff. Absolutely. I mean, for example, obviously things like the Koh-i-Noor is well known who cut that. We know who cut the pit diamond, for example, going back. We know a few of them we do, and we'll probably be able to gradually fill in. I mean, diamond cutting a stone of this size was quite a serious thing. I mean, you make a mistake, you lost a fair bit of money. So it was an important thing. You didn't entrust it just to anybody. So I think there probably are records somewhere for most of these. Yes, I would guess.
Okay, a question by Gerald Livings. At what point in time can we say that the people writing about diamonds can be considered reliable? If you mentioned Streeter, yeah. At what time does it become reliable? Is there a kind of cutoff time that you say, okay, now people are academically responsible, or? You know?
Well, I mean, the answer is maybe 50 years from now, because people were learning all. I mean, if you Google the nassak diamond or the pigot diamond, the agra diamond now on the internet, and you'll be bombarded with things about it that are mostly not unsubstantiated.
Yeah.
Because this just goes around. I mean, it's one of the. I mean, the internet is fantastic, but it's also a disaster in the sense that bad information gets around all the time. So there's so much nonsense up there, and it keeps going. And even sort of some recent sort of serious books. The worst thing is the sort of scholarly get out said to be. You quite often read this, you know, the so-and-so and said to have been whatever. I think, question everything. I think it's the only answer. I mean, you know, I'm sure. Ask me some of the same questions about the same stones in a year, 2 years' time, and I'll probably have slightly different answers. We find out new things all the time. Yeah. But the answer is basically question everything and try and substantiate stuff. I mean, I'm very lucky in the UK because I've got the East India Company records in London at what used to be the India Office Library, now the British Library. That's all there. We have amazing newspaper archives which are easily reachable online. So it's quite easy to do that. I mean, people have access to the Portuguese or the Dutch records and stuff. I mean, there's plenty of work can be done there as well. I mean, there's a huge amount of information out there. And I only feel I sort of scratched the surface. And as you say with diamonds, you can't even scratch the surface, really, can you?
Yeah, that's true. Two more questions. Here is a question by Cecilia Levin. It's not about one of the diamonds that you discussed. It says, is there any reappearance of the Cleveland diamond cut in New York in 1884, since it was owned by a Croatian opera singer in Zagreb and disappeared in 41? Do you know anything about it, or is this something for a next lecture?
I have no idea, I'm afraid. No record of that. I mean, I've heard of a stone called the Cleveland diamond, but I've never found any information about it, I'm afraid.
Okay. Jack, can we conclude with a bit of a personal question? Anyone who reads your Wikipedia entry you don't have LinkedIn, but your Wikipedia entry shows that you have actually gone from working in your family business to having your hobby, as you showed it on the screen, and then to a PhD. How did you get catapulted into that academic stream? How did that happen? And what would you tell jewelry enthusiasts who have no academic training to get where you are?
Well, I mean, I said, I started off with an interest in both archaeology and jewellery. But the jewellery industry, I'm afraid, bored me stiff. You know, you'd sell a diamond ring and you'd reorder another diamond ring. I didn't find it particularly interesting. But having worked for Guberland in 1968 for the year, I realised there was a scientific side, the research side to it. So I thought I'd start to look into the materials and technology of early jewellery, look at how it was made, what it was made of. And I found there hadn't been much work done on it. So I started doing research on that. Ended up, I wrote a book called Jewellery of the Ancient World in 1982, which was looking at the materials and technology of early jewellery. And one of the few guys who had done work on ancient Egyptian materials was a man called John Harris, who had revised an earlier volume, John Harris, Ancient Egyptian Materials and Industries. He revised that book in the 60s. And he was professor in Durham. And I actually sent him a copy because his book had been really useful to me. So I sent him a copy of my book. And next time he was in London, he came to have a chat with me. And he said, "So where did you do your degree?" And I said, "Well, actually, no, I left school at 16. I sort of skipped all that stuff." He said, "Well, what about doing a doctorate?" And I said, "Well, you know, I don't have a degree. I don't even have A-levels, as they call them in the UK." And he said, "Well, Durham University, like Oxford and like Cambridge and probably some others, in order to do a PhD, you have to show that you have a relevant degree or equivalent academic background." And he said, "Your book, 1982 book, is undoubtedly equivalent of a degree in terms of academic whatever." So I said, "Well, sounds great. Let's do it."
So great. Your book was your MA, and you were promoted. You went straight to a PhD. Wonderful.
Yeah.
We have shot 11 minutes over time, but we will not conclude before we ask Alex to say thank you, and then we are going to conclude. Jack, this has been, according to what I see on the chats, people have been raving about your speech, about your presentation. We hope to have you back at some time. Thank you very much. Thank you for everyone who attended. And we still have more than 130 people with us. And we had 160 at the top. Wonderful. Absolutely fantastic. And Alex, just to conclude, and we...
You see, I'm so excited that I took the jacket off because it was so nice to hear you, Jack. First of all, Jack, thank you very much. I think you put the very good start. You put the level of presentation on the height that everybody else should now go over it, and I hope it will happen in the next session. And I would like to thank very much everyone who participated. We have had a wonderful audience today. Needless to say that we will have the YouTube video available to everyone who participated and also those who registered and for some reason couldn't participate. So I'm looking forward to see you all on our next presentation. And again, thank you, Jack. Thank you, Jakob. Thank you, Usha. And thank you, Brinda. And everybody has a wonderful weekend. I think it's a good start of the beautiful weekend. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.